My name is Morgan Thornton. I'm 31. Last month, my mother stood up in front of 75 people at my daughter's christening and told every single one of them I was too unstable to choose a godparent. She said my sister Carmen should be named godmother instead, over the woman who actually showed up when I needed help. My mom had a letter, signed by my father, my aunt, and two cousins. She called it an intervention. The pastor, a man who's known my family for 20 years, held that letter in his hands and hesitated. 75 people stared at me. My baby started to cry. And I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I didn't give my mother the scene she'd rehearsed. I picked up my daughter, walked straight to that pastor, and whispered one sentence in his ear. His face changed. We were gone before the holy water dried. Before I tell you what happened, please take a moment to like and subscribe. And drop a comment. Where are you watching from right now, and what time is it there? Now let me take you back to the week before the christening, the week everything was still supposed to be perfect. Lily is 4 months old now. She has Nathan's eyes, dark brown, serious. And my chin, which means she'll inherit my stubbornness too. She laughs when she hears running water. She grabs my finger and holds on like she's afraid I'll disappear. I almost did disappear. Postpartum depression hit me 3 weeks after delivery. Not the kind you see in movies where the mother stares out a window looking sad. The kind where you're standing in the kitchen at 2 a.m., holding a bottle, and you genuinely cannot remember why you walked in there. The kind where you love your baby so fiercely it terrifies you, and that terror sits on your chest like a stone. I called my doctor at week 4, started therapy at week 5, medication at week 6. I did everything right. I fought for myself because Lily needed me to. I also called my mother. 3 a.m., sobbing, barely holding it together. I told Rosa I was struggling. I asked for help. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Maybe this is a sign you weren't ready for a baby, Morgan." I never called her again. The person I did call was Diane Prescott, my college roommate. The woman who, for 3 straight months, drove 2 hours every Saturday to my house. She didn't give advice. She washed bottles. She folded laundry. She held Lily so I could shower for the first time in 4 days. When I finally told her I'd been diagnosed, she said, "Good, now we know what we're fighting." My mother knew I was drowning. She handed me an anchor. Diane drove 2 hours and threw me a rope. That's the difference between judgment and love. And that difference is why I chose Diane to be Lily's godmother. Rosa Medina has been making decisions for me since I was 6 years old. Which school, which friends were appropriate, which career was acceptable. She wanted law, I chose nursing, and she didn't speak to me for 2 weeks. When I started dating Nathan, a man who doesn't attend her church, she told me at dinner, in front of my father and Carmen, "He'll leave when things get hard." Nathan didn't leave. Rosa never forgave him for that. My sister Carmen is 3 years younger, lives 45 minutes from my parents, and graduated from law school last year. She goes to Rosa's church every Sunday. She calls Rosa every evening. In my mother's world, Carmen is the daughter who followed instructions. I'm the daughter who needed correcting. Rosa chaired the parent committee at our church for 15 years. She organized every bake sale, every charity drive, every holiday service. When Rosa spoke, the congregation listened. When Rosa suggested something, it happened. She ran that church the same way she ran our family, with a smile that said, "I'm only doing what's best," and a grip that never loosened. After I got married, the grip tightened. Rosa called 3 times a day. She showed up at our house without warning. She commented on how I held Lily, how I fed her, how I burped her. She'd rearrange items in the nursery while I was in the bathroom. Every visit felt like an inspection. I kept letting her in. I kept thinking, she's my mother. She raised me. If I just show her I'm handling things, she'll relax. She'll trust me. I should have seen what was coming. The signs were all there. But I was still trying to earn something she was never going to give me. Nathan and I talked about it for a week before we decided. Godmother isn't just a title, it's a promise. If something happens to us, this is the person who raises Lily. The person who knows her routines, her allergies, her favorite lullaby. The person who already loves her. Diane had earned that role with every 2-hour drive, every midnight bottle, every quiet Saturday she spent in our living room proving she wasn't going anywhere. I called Rosa on a Tuesday afternoon. I kept it simple. We've chosen a godmother for Lily. It's Diane. Silence. 10 full seconds. Diane? The girl from college? She's 32, Mom. And yes, she's not even family, Morgan. She was more family than anyone these past 6 months. Another silence. Longer this time. Then, fine. It's your decision. And she hung up. That same night, Carmen texted me. One message. Mom says you picked a stranger over me? I typed back. Diane isn't a stranger, and Mom didn't get to pick. Carmen never replied. After that, something strange happened. Rosa went quiet. No phone calls, no drop-by visits, no opinions about Lily's sleep schedule or the brand of formula I was using. 2 full weeks of silence. If you've ever lived with a controlling parent, you know that silence isn't peace. Silence is planning. It's the intake of breath before the storm. A quiet Rosa Medina is more dangerous than a loud one, because loud means she's reacting. Quiet means she's decided. 2 weeks of silence from my mother. That should have been my first warning. Rosa is never quiet unless she's building something. And whatever she was building, I was about to walk straight into it. 10 days before the christening, I was deep in planning. Lily's white baptism dress hung on the closet door, hand-embroidered, ordered 2 months ago. I'd chosen the hymns, printed 75 invitations on cream cardstock, reserved the fellowship hall for a small reception after. This was supposed to be Lily's day. I'd been picturing it since the 3rd trimester, back when I could barely get out of bed. The christening was proof. Proof I'd survived. Proof I was standing. Proof I could give my daughter something beautiful. Rosa started calling again. But not the usual calls. These were questions, specific ones. Who's sitting where? Which hymn goes first? Who's bringing the cake? I answered without thinking. I shouldn't have. Then Nathan came home one evening looking uncomfortable. Your dad called me at work. About what? He asked if you were really okay. He said Rosa's worried you're still... He paused. You know. Still what, Nathan? Still struggling. I set down the invitation I was addressing. What did you tell him? That you're more than fine. That you finished therapy 4 months ago. That your doctor cleared you. Nathan loosened his tie. He said, well, Rosa's just worried. Then he hung up. Frank calling Nathan directly meant one thing. Rosa was running a campaign. She wasn't worried. She was gathering allies. I stood in the kitchen holding a stack of invitations for a ceremony celebrating my daughter's life, and I realized something that made my stomach drop. If I gave in on the godmother question, if I let Rosa override this one decision, it wouldn't stop here. Next it would be Lily's school, her doctor, her holidays. Every decision, for the rest of Lily's childhood, filtered through Rosa first. This wasn't about Diane. This was about who gets to decide how my daughter grows up. Pastor David Hargrove has led our congregation for 22 years. He baptized me when I was 12. He officiated my parents' anniversary dinner. He's been to Rosa's house for Thanksgiving more times than I can count. In that church, Rosa isn't just a member, she's an institution. 15 years on the events committee, organized the annual coat drive, recruited volunteers for the food pantry. When Rosa walks into that building, people greet her by name and move out of her way. She's earned loyalty through decades of visible service, and she knows exactly how much that loyalty is worth. After I married Nathan, I stopped attending as regularly. We tried a church closer to our house for a while, then drifted. Rosa noticed. She told people at the congregation, Morgan's pulling away from her faith. I worry about her. She said it the way she says everything, with a sigh, a tilted head, and the implication that she's suffering nobly. 1 week before the christening, I met with Pastor Hargrove to confirm the ceremony details. We sat in his office, wood paneling, the smell of old hymnals. He reviewed the order of service, then paused. Your mother mentioned some concerns about the godmother choice. He folded his hands. Is everything all right at home, Morgan? I looked at him. Everything is fine, Pastor. Diane is my choice. She meets every requirement. He nodded. But his eyes didn't settle. He shuffled papers, changed the subject. Rosa had already gotten to him. I didn't know how much she'd said or what version she'd told. But the pastor's discomfort told me enough. He'd heard something, and he wasn't sure whose side to take. I didn't know it then, but Rosa had already done more than talk. She'd written a letter, and she'd gotten 4 signatures. Saturday night, the night before. Diane arrived at 6 with a garment bag and a teddy bear wearing a tiny cross necklace. For her first Bible, she said, handing it to Lily, who immediately grabbed the bear's ear and shoved it in her mouth. We sat in the living room, Lily on a blanket between us. Diane smoothed the christening dress across her lap and ran a finger over the embroidery. "I've been practicing holding a baby and a candle at the same time," she said. "Turns out it's harder than it looks." I laughed. A real laugh. The first easy one in weeks. Nathan ran through the checklist. Dress, shoes, camera charged, reserved seats, reception food arriving at 11. Everything ready. Everything perfect. At 8, I called Rosa to confirm her arrival time. She picked up on the 4th ring. "I'll be there." That's all she said. Not, "I can't wait." Not, "I'm so excited for Lily." Just, "I'll be there." I told myself it was nothing. Rosa isn't warm on the phone. Never has been. Nathan saw my face after I hung up. "Should we be worried?" "She's my mother," I said. "What's the worst she can do at a church?" I put Lily to bed, laid out her dress on the changing table, ironed it a 3rd time because the collar wouldn't sit flat. Diane and I stayed up until midnight talking about college, about our old dorm, about the time she carried me home from a party and made me drink 3 glasses of water. We didn't talk about Rosa. We didn't need to. I should have. I would find out exactly what the worst was. In front of 75 people. In less than 12 hours. I'm sitting here telling you this story, and I can still feel the fabric of Lily's christening dress between my fingers that night. I ironed it 3 times. I was so careful about every single detail. If you're a mom who's ever planned something this meaningful for your child and felt that pit in your stomach that someone was going to ruin it, you know exactly what I mean. If this is hitting close, go ahead and hit that like button. And stick with me, because what happened the next morning inside that church, I still can't believe my own mother did it. Sunday morning. Clear sky. Cool enough for the blazer I'd picked out, but warm enough that Lily wouldn't need an extra blanket. We arrived 20 minutes early. Nathan carried Lily in her car seat. Diane walked beside me, heels clicking on the stone steps. The church doors were propped open, old oak, heavy, the same doors I'd walked through every Sunday for 18 years growing up. Inside, wooden pews, stained glass throwing colored light across the floor, the smell of candle wax and lemon polish. 75 guests were already seated, family from both sides, friends from work, members of the congregation who'd watched me grow up in this building. I scanned the room and found Rosa in the 2nd row, not the front row, the 2nd. She sat beside Frank, hands folded in her lap, Carmen next to her. Rosa was wearing black, not a dark navy, not charcoal, black, like a funeral. I noticed. Then I told myself to stop reading into things. My mother has always been dramatic about color. We walked to the front. Nathan settled Lily into my arms. Diane took her place beside us. Pastor Hargrove stood at the baptismal font, the old stone basin filled with water, a white cloth draped over the edge. Rosa approached. She hugged me. One arm, brief, the way you hug someone at an obligation. She didn't look at Lily. She didn't greet Diane. But she caught the pastor's eye as she turned back to her seat. A small nod. Quick. Almost nothing. Almost. Pastor Hargrove opened with a prayer. Read a passage from Matthew. Welcomed the family. Standard, warm, familiar. Everything was going exactly as planned, for the next 4 minutes. Pastor Hargrove turned toward Diane. "And the godmother, Diane Prescott, will you please?" A chair scraped against the floor. Rosa stood up. 2nd row, center aisle. She was already facing the congregation before the pastor finished his sentence. "Pastor, I'm sorry." Her voice carried through the room like she'd practiced the projection. "I need to say something before this goes any further." Every head turned. 75 people. Mid-prayer, mid-expectation, pivoting to look at my mother. Pastor Hargrove stopped. His mouth was still open around Diane's name. He closed it. I felt my heart hit my ribs. Rosa smoothed the front of her black dress. She looked out over the pews with an expression I've seen 100 times. The composed grief, the brave mother carrying a heavy burden. She'd rehearsed this face in mirrors, I'm sure of it. "Most of you know our family," she began. "You've watched my girls grow up in this church. You've watched me pour everything into being a good mother. And I wouldn't be standing here, believe me, I wouldn't, if I didn't think this was absolutely necessary." She paused. Let the silence work for her. Rosa knows how silence works in a room full of people. She's used it at committee meetings, at fundraisers, at dinner tables. Silence makes people lean forward. "My daughter Morgan has been through a very difficult time since the baby was born." She touched her chest. "A very difficult time. And I don't believe she's in the right state of mind to be making a decision this important." She didn't say postpartum depression. She didn't use any clinical term. She used a different word, a word that lands heavier. Unstable. 75 people heard it, and every one of them looked at me. Rosa reached into her handbag. Black leather, polished, the one she carries to Sunday services. She pulled out a white envelope. Inside was a typed letter. Clean margins, formal language, the kind of letter you draft on a computer and print on good paper. "This letter is signed by 4 members of our family." She held it up so the people in the back rows could see. "Myself, Frank, my sister Linda, and my nieces Taylor and Brooke. We believe, for the well-being of baby Lily, that Carmen should be named godmother instead." She turned to the pastor and extended the envelope. "Pastor Hargrove, you've known me for 20 years. You know I would not do this if I didn't truly believe my grandchild was at risk." The word risk landed like a dropped glass. I looked at Carmen. She sat in the second row, eyes on her own lap. She didn't nod. She didn't shake her head. She didn't stand. She just sat there, receiving the spotlight Rosa had shoved onto her without lifting a single finger to earn it or refuse it. Frank stared straight ahead, both hands on his knees, jaw tight. He looked like a man who'd made a deal and was watching the payment come due. The congregation stirred. Whispers started in the back pews and rolled forward. Somewhere behind me, I heard the unmistakable click of a phone camera. An older woman in the third row pressed her hand to her mouth. Diane's fingers found mine and squeezed. Nathan's arm was already against my back, solid, steady. Rosa looked at me. She was waiting. For tears, for shouting, for the collapse she'd scripted. "I'm doing this because I love my granddaughter," she said. "Sometimes love means being the one who speaks up." I said nothing, not yet. Pastor Hargrove looked at the letter in his hand, then at Rosa, then at me. "Rosa, this is..." He cleared his throat. "This is highly unusual. Perhaps we should discuss this privately after the..." "Pastor," Rosa's voice cut clean. "I understand this is uncomfortable, but wouldn't it be worse if something happened to that baby because we stayed silent?" A few heads in the congregation nodded, the people who only knew Rosa's version, the people who'd heard her whisper concerns in the parking lot after Sunday services for weeks. I could see them, 2 women near the window, an older couple in the 5th row, nodding like Rosa was saving a child from a burning building. Others stared at me with pity. That was worse. Pity means they already believed her. Lily stirred in Nathan's arms. A small sound first, then a whimper, then a full cry. The sharp, startled kind. The kind babies make when something in the room changes and they feel it even though they can't understand it. Her cry cut through the whispers and the silence and the shuffling of uncomfortable bodies in wooden pews. Nathan held her closer. I watched my daughter's face, red, scrunched, crying in a church full of people who were staring at her mother like she was broken. I looked at Rosa. She was still standing, chin up, waiting. I looked at Diane, eyes red, but her back was straight. I looked at the pastor, caught, frozen between a woman he'd trusted for 20 years and a ceremony he was supposed to be leading. Then I looked at Lily again, and I knew, not what I was going to do. I'd already decided that. But why? I knew exactly why I was about to stand up and end this. I need to pause the scene for a moment, because there's something you need to know before I tell you what happened next. 3 months earlier, when I was deep in therapy for postpartum depression, my therapist suggested I write letters to the people who'd hurt me, not to send, just to write. So I sat at the kitchen table one night after Lily was asleep and started writing to Rosa. Halfway through, a memory surfaced. I was 5 years old. Carmen was a newborn. And one morning I woke up and Rosa was gone. Not at the store, not at church, gone. My grandmother, my father's mother, Nana Ruth, showed up that afternoon with a suitcase. She moved into our spare room and stayed for 3 weeks. Nobody told me where my mother went. I asked Nana Ruth once. She pulled me into her lap and said, "Your mama is resting, sweetheart. She'll be home soon." Rosa came back. Nobody talked about it, ever. The 3 weeks disappeared from family history like they'd been cut out with scissors. Years later, just before Nana Ruth passed, I asked her about it. She was in the hospice bed, thin and tired, but her mind was sharp. "Your mother had a very hard time after Carmen," she said. "We took care of things. We don't talk about it." She squeezed my hand. "Don't hold it against her." I never did. I never mentioned it to Rosa. I never used it. It was just a piece of the past, something that explained the tightness in my mother's jaw whenever anyone suggested she wasn't in control. But standing in that church, listening to my mother call me unstable in front of 75 people, that memory came back with the force of a door slamming open. My mother walked out on us for 3 weeks. No one called her unfit. No one wrote a letter. There's one more thing. When I was planning the christening, I did my research. I'm a nurse. I read protocols for a living. So when it came to my daughter's baptism, I read the church's own guidelines cover to cover. In our denomination, the parents hold full authority over selecting godparents. The pastor can only raise an objection if the chosen godparent doesn't meet the church's faith requirements, meaning they haven't been baptized or don't profess the faith. That's it. No other grounds. Diane is a baptized Christian. She attends a church in her own town. Her pastor provided a written confirmation of her membership, which I submitted to Pastor Hargrove 2 weeks before the ceremony. Everything was in order, every box checked. By the church's own rules, there was no basis, none, for what Rosa was doing. But there was something else I'd noticed. When Pastor Hargrove asked me that question in his office, "Is everything all right at home?" I'd wondered how he knew to ask it. I hadn't told him about my depression. Nathan hadn't. My medical history isn't something I discuss with clergy, which means Rosa told him. She shared my private health information with a third party without my consent. In pastoral ethics, that crosses a line. A pastor who receives confidential information about a congregant from a family member and then acts on it without verifying with the congregant first has compromised his duty of care. I didn't know exactly what Rosa had said to him, but that question in his office told me enough. He'd been briefed, and he hadn't come to me first. I had 2 facts: my mother's own history, and the rules she was asking the pastor to break. I didn't need a weapon, I just needed one sentence. Back in the church, real time. Lily is crying, Rosa is standing. The pastor is holding a letter he didn't ask for. 75 people are waiting to see what the unstable mother does next. I looked at Nathan. He held my eyes. His jaw was set, but his expression was clear. "Whatever you decide, I'm right here." I looked at Diane. She was gripping the edge of the pew. Her mascara was smudged at the corner. But she wasn't looking at Rosa. She was looking at me. Steady. I looked at my mother. Rosa's chin was lifted. Her eyes were dry. She was waiting for me to crumble, to cry, to argue, to storm out in tears. Any of those would prove her point. Any of those would give the congregation the story Rosa wanted them to tell. Poor Rosa, trying to help her troubled daughter, and look how Morgan reacted. I wasn't going to give her that. I stood up. The room went still. Every whisper stopped. Every phone lowered. I walked to Nathan and lifted Lily from his arms. She was still fussing. I held her against my chest, her face turned into my neck. She quieted almost immediately. She always does when I hold her like that. She knows my heartbeat. Then I walked down the center aisle. 75 pairs of eyes followed me. Rosa's smile started to form. She thought I was walking toward Carmen. She thought I was surrendering. I walked past Carmen without looking at her. Past my father, who didn't move. Past my Aunt Linda, who pressed herself back in the pew like she could disappear. I stopped directly in front of Pastor Hargrove, and I leaned in. Rosa's smile vanished. Because I wasn't walking toward Carmen. I was 1 inch from the pastor's ear. I'll tell you what I said in a moment. But first, let me tell you what the room looked like from where I was standing. The baptismal font was to my right, water still in the basin, untouched. The white cloth draped over the edge hadn't been moved. Lily's christening, the one I'd planned for 2 months, was never going to happen in this room. I knew that the second Rosa stood up, and I'd made peace with it in the time it took me to walk 30 feet down that aisle. I leaned close to Pastor Hargrove, close enough that only he could hear me. Lily was warm against my chest, breathing softly, calm now. I said one sentence. I kept my voice low, my tone flat, the way I speak to doctors when I'm reporting patient vitals. No anger, no accusation, just information. The pastor's face changed. First his eyebrows pulled together. Confusion. Then his lips parted. Recognition. Then his eyes closed. 2 full seconds. When they opened, he looked past me, directly at Rosa. I stepped back. I spoke at normal volume, just enough for the first few rows to hear. "We're done here. Thank you for your time, Pastor." I turned around. Nathan was already standing, Lily's coat in one hand, the diaper bag over his shoulder. Diane was on her feet, purse in hand. They'd both known the moment I stood up. I walked back up the aisle. Past Rosa, who opened her mouth but no sound came out. Past Frank, who was staring at the floor. Past 75 people who didn't know what to do with their hands. I pushed through the oak doors. Sunlight hit my face. Lily yawned against my neck. We were in the car before anyone came outside. The holy water never touched my daughter's forehead. Not in that church. Not on that day. I learned what happened next from 2 sources. Nathan's cousin, who was seated in the back row, and a friend from high school who still attends that church. The second I walked out, Rosa stood frozen in the aisle. Her script had 3 possible endings. Morgan cries and agrees. Morgan argues and looks unhinged. Morgan runs out in tears, and the congregation comforts Rosa. None of those happened. Morgan picked up her baby, whispered something to the pastor that turned his face gray, said thank you, and left. Calmly. Quietly. With her head up. Rosa didn't have a line for that. Pastor Hargrove stared at the letter in his hand for a long time. Then he looked up. Not at Rosa, but at the congregation. "I think we need to end the service here today." His voice was thick. "Please keep the Thornton family in your prayers." He walked into the back room and closed the door. The congregation sat in stunned silence for about 10 seconds. Then the noise started, low murmurs building into open conversation. People stood up, gathered in clusters. Some headed for the exit. Others turned to Rosa. "What just happened? What did she say to him?" "Rosa, are you all right?" Rosa straightened her shoulders. Damage control voice activated. "You see? This is exactly what I was trying to prevent. She's not well." Carmen stood next to Rosa, arms crossed, eyes on the door I'd walked through. She didn't speak. Frank put on his hat. "Let's go, Rosa." "No." Rosa's jaw was tight. "I'm not leaving. This is my church." She stayed for 40 minutes, talking to anyone who'd listen, rewriting the story in real time. But the pastor never came back out, and 14 people had left before Rosa finished her first sentence. We sat in the parking lot for 2 minutes without speaking. The engine was running. Nathan's hands were on the steering wheel. Diane was in the back seat next to Lily's car seat. Nobody moved. Then Diane said very quietly, "What did you say to him?" "The truth." She didn't press. Nathan didn't ask. They just let the silence sit there, and I was grateful for that. I wasn't ready to explain yet. I was still shaking, not from fear, but from the effort of staying that calm when every nerve in my body wanted to scream. Nathan pulled out of the parking lot. His knuckles were white on the wheel. I could see the muscle in his jaw working. He was furious, not at me, but for me. But he didn't vent. He didn't curse Rosa's name. He just drove. I looked at Lily in the rearview mirror. She'd fallen asleep. Her hand was wrapped around the teddy bear Diane had given her the night before, the one with the tiny cross necklace. She had no idea what had just happened. She didn't know that her grandmother had tried to turn her christening into a courtroom. She just knew she was warm and someone she trusted was holding her. I made a promise in that car. You will never sit in a room where someone uses your mother's pain as a weapon. Never. I picked up my phone and called a number I'd saved 3 weeks ago. just in case. Pastor Rebecca Lowell, at Grace Community Church, Diane's church when she visits. Pastor Lowell, it's Morgan Thornton. We spoke on the phone last month. A pause. I need to ask a favor. Could we schedule a christening for tomorrow afternoon? She said yes before I finished the sentence. By 9 o'clock that night, my phone showed 14 missed calls from Rosa, 6 text messages. The progression told you everything. 2:14 p.m. I did this for Lily. You need to understand that. 3:41 p.m. Morgan, answer your phone. 5:02 p.m. You humiliated me in front of the entire church. 6:18 p.m. Everyone is asking me what happened. I had to explain that you're going through something. 7:45 p.m. If you don't call me back tonight, you will regret this. 9:03 p.m. I am your mother. Nathan's phone rang at 9:30. Frank, can you get Morgan to call her mother? Rosa's very upset. Nathan didn't hesitate. Rosa should be upset. She stood up in a church and called my wife unstable in front of 75 people. That's not what happened. I was there, Frank. I was sitting 3 feet away. Frank went quiet. Then, she was trying to help. Click. Carmen texted me at 10. Mom is devastated. You didn't have to walk out like that. You could have just talked to her afterward. I stared at that message for a long time. Could have just talked to her afterward. As if what Rosa did was a disagreement over a seating chart. As if standing up in a sacred ceremony and calling your daughter mentally unfit in front of everyone she knows is the kind of thing you handle with a quiet chat over coffee. I didn't respond. Then my Aunt Linda called. Morgan, your mother only wants what's best. Don't let pride ruin your family. Linda, did you actually read the letter you signed? A pause. Your mother explained the situation. She explained her version. Did you ever call me and ask for mine? Silence. Linda hung up. None of them asked me if I was okay. Not one. Monday morning. Diane called me from her car on the drive back to her town. Your mother just called me. My stomach dropped. She what? She called from a number I didn't recognize. She said, and I'm quoting, I don't know who you think you are, but you have no right to be in my granddaughter's life. I closed my eyes. What did you say? I said, Mrs. Medina, Morgan asked me. It's her decision. And? Diane exhaled. She said you were sick, that you don't know what you're doing, that a real friend would step aside and let the family handle it. I could hear the highway noise behind her, the turn signal clicking. Diane, I'm so sorry. She shouldn't have. Morgan, stop. I drove 2 hours every Saturday for 3 months. I washed bottles at 2 in the morning. I held your baby while you slept. She doesn't get to tell me I have no right. Diane's voice was steady, but I could hear the anger underneath, the kind that comes from being disrespected by someone who never showed up. I told her one more thing, Diane said. What? I said, a real mother would have driven those 2 hours herself instead of calling her daughter unstable in a church. Then she hung up on me. I sat in my kitchen and held the phone to my ear and felt something shift. Not anger, something colder, clarity. Rosa wasn't going to stop at me. She'd go after anyone connected to me, anyone who supported me, anyone who made it possible for me to stand on my own. Because my independence was the thing she couldn't control. This wasn't about Lily's christening anymore. This was about Rosa losing grip on everything she'd built her identity around. And I was done letting her rebuild it on top of mine. I need to pause here for a second. Because if you're watching this, and you've ever had someone in your family call a person you trust, a friend, a partner, anyone, and try to push them out of your life because they couldn't control you through them, I see you. That is not love. That is territory. If this story is making you think of someone, send it to them. Or just drop a comment. Have you ever had a family member go after someone close to you just to get to you? I want to hear your story. Now. The christening that actually happened. Sunday afternoon, a different church. Grace Community was smaller than the one I grew up in. White clapboard walls, a garden out front with daffodils pushing through the last of the winter frost. No stone baptismal font, just a ceramic bowl on a wooden stand filled with warm water. 20 people, Nathan's parents, his brother and sister-in-law, Diane, 3 of my closest friends from the hospital, 2 neighbors who'd brought us meals after Lily was born, a few members of Diane's church who stayed after their morning service because Pastor Lowell asked them to. No Rosa, no Frank, no Carmen, no Aunt Linda, no cousins Taylor or Brooke. 20 people who were there because they wanted to be, not because they were performing. Pastor Rebecca Lowell met us at the door. She was younger than Pastor Hargrove, early 40s, warm eyes, a handshake that was more of a handhold. She looked at Lily and said, "What a beautiful girl. Are we ready?" I looked at Nathan. He nodded. I looked at Diane, who was already reaching for Lily with the ease of someone who'd held her 100 times. "I've never been more ready," I said. The ceremony was everything the first one was supposed to be. Pastor Lowell read from Psalms. She spoke about what it means to welcome a child into a community of love, real love, the kind that shows up, not the kind that shows off. Diane held Lily while the water was poured. Lily didn't cry. She grabbed a fistful of Diane's hair and laughed. I cried, the good kind. The kind where your chest opens up and everything you've been carrying since 3 a.m. phone calls and typed letters and a word spoken in a church full of strangers, all of it just lifts. Nathan put his arm around me. Diane whispered, "She's perfect." She was. "All right, you've been waiting. So here it is." When I leaned into Pastor Hargrove, with Lily against my chest and 75 people staring at my back, I said, "Pastor, did you know my mother had her own breakdown after my sister was born? She left her family for 3 weeks. Ask her about that before you let her call me unfit." That's it. 1 sentence, 29 words. I didn't ask him to expose Rosa. I didn't demand he announce it from the pulpit. I didn't threaten him or guilt him. I gave him a fact, a true, verifiable, decades-old fact, and I let him decide what to do with it. Here's why it mattered. Rosa had spent weeks building a case. Morgan is unstable. Morgan can't make decisions. Morgan is a risk to her own child. She'd used her 20-year relationship with that pastor, her reputation in the congregation, and a letter signed by 4 family members to create the image of a concerned mother doing the hard thing. 1 sentence dismantled it. Because if Rosa had been through the same thing and had been protected, hidden, forgiven, allowed to move on without a single letter or public accusation, then everything she did to me wasn't concern. It was hypocrisy, and the pastor knew it the second I said it. He didn't act immediately. That's not how church communities work. But he did verify. He spoke privately with an older congregant, a woman who'd been a member for over 40 years, someone old enough to remember. She confirmed it. Rosa had left, 3 weeks. Frank's mother had moved in to care for the children. The pastor didn't expose Rosa. He didn't need to. He just stopped trusting her. And in a small-town church, that's everything. 3 weeks after the christening, Rosa walked into Sunday service the way she always does, early, center aisle, 2nd row. She expected the usual greetings, the nods, the deference. Pastor Hargrove shook her hand at the door. Polite, brief. He didn't stop to chat the way he always had. He moved on to the next person. Rosa noticed. During announcements, the summer events committee was listed. 5 names. Rosa's wasn't among them. For the first time in 15 years, she hadn't been asked to serve. After the service, she approached the pastor. "David, I think there's been a mistake with the committee list." He looked at her evenly. "No mistake, Rosa. We're restructuring this year. Fresh perspectives," she pressed. "I've chaired that committee since—" "I know." He held her gaze. "And I appreciate your years of service. But I think it's time for a change." Rosa stiffened. She knew. She didn't know how much. But she knew. The following Tuesday, she called me. Her voice was different. The command was gone. In its place was something thin, controlled. "What did you say to him, Morgan?" "I told him the truth. Something you've been hiding for 26 years. A long pause. I could hear her breathing through the phone. "That was different," she said. "Was it?" "I was going through something personal. It had nothing to do with—" "You left for 3 weeks, Mom. You left 2 children. Dad's mother had to move in. And nobody stood up in a church and called you unfit." She didn't respond. "You got silence and grace," I said. "I got a letter and 75 witnesses." The line went quiet. Then she hung up. She didn't call back for 6 days. Nathan and I sat at the kitchen table the following weekend. Lily was napping. The house was quiet. We didn't raise our voices once during the conversation. We didn't need to. We both knew exactly what had to happen. We wrote an email, addressed to Rosa and Frank. Clear language, no emotion, no accusations, just rules. 1. Rosa does not come to our home without an invitation made at least 24 hours in advance. 2. All communication regarding Lily goes through both Morgan and Nathan. Not one, both. 3. Rosa does not discuss Morgan's medical history with anyone. Any violation ends all contact immediately. 4. Carmen is welcome to visit Lily independently, on her own initiative, without Rosa as intermediary. I read it twice. Nathan read it once. We sent it. CC'd Nathan so there was a record. Nathan called Frank separately that evening. These boundaries aren't negotiable, Frank. If Rosa can respect them, she'll see Lily. If she can't, she won't. Frank's voice was strained. This is breaking your mother's heart. Rosa broke something first. Nathan paused. And you helped her, Frank. You signed that letter. You sat in that pew and said nothing while your daughter was humiliated. I didn't know it would go that far. You didn't try to stop it either. Silence. Can I still see my granddaughter? Frank asked. Read the email. Follow the rules. That's all we're asking. We didn't hear from Rosa for 10 days after the email. No calls, no texts, no drive-bys. 10 days of silence. The same kind of silence she'd used before the christening, except this time I wasn't afraid of what it meant. This time the silence was mine. I'd drawn the line. She was the one deciding whether to cross it. Carmen called the following week. I almost didn't answer. But something about the timing, no Rosa preamble, no group text, just Carmen's name on my screen, made me pick up. She wasn't hostile. But she wasn't soft either. She sounded like a woman reading from a script she'd only half rehearsed. Mom showed me the email. Don't you think it's a little extreme? Did you ask Mom if it was extreme when she stood up in a church and called me unstable? Pause. She was worried. You know how she is. I know exactly how she is, Carmen. The question is whether you do. I heard her exhale. A long one. The kind that carries a lot of things a person isn't ready to say. I didn't ask to be godmother. Her voice dropped. She didn't ask me first. I let that sit. She told me the morning of the christening, in the car. She said, I'm going to speak to the pastor. Carmen, you'll step in. I didn't even know about the letter until she pulled it out. Something shifted in my chest. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But recognition. Carmen had been holding the same envelope Rosa handed her. She just hadn't opened it until now. So what do you want from me? She asked. Nothing, I said. But if you want to know your niece, you know where I am. She was quiet. Then, okay. One word. Small. But it was the first time in years that Carmen had said something to me that didn't have Rosa's fingerprints on it. I didn't know if she'd follow through. She might call Rosa the second we hung up and repeat everything, but I'd rather leave one door open and see who walks through it than lock everything down and wonder. 2 months later, a friend from high school, Megan, still a member of the congregation, sent me a text. Thought you should know. Pastor Hargrove had a private conversation with your mom last week. I didn't ask Megan to spy. She volunteered. In a small-town church, news moves like water through old pipes, slow, steady, impossible to stop. According to Megan, the pastor called Rosa into his office on a Tuesday afternoon. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse her of anything specific. He said, Rosa, I've given this a lot of thought. I feel I was put in an unfair position during the christening. What happened that day damaged trust, between you and this church, and between you and me. Rosa tried to redirect. I was trying to protect my grandchild. I understand that's how you saw it. The pastor folded his hands. But I've since learned that the situation was more complicated than it was presented to me. I should have spoken with Morgan directly. I didn't, and that's on me. But I also relied on information that was incomplete. He didn't say what information. He didn't mention 3 weeks or a breakdown or Nana Ruth. He didn't have to. Rosa understood. Her removal from the events committee was the first visible change. Then she wasn't asked to coordinate the holiday bake sale. Then her name disappeared from the Sunday Bulletin's volunteer acknowledgments. No public announcement, no sermon about it. Just a quiet, steady withdrawal of the institutional trust Rosa had spent 15 years building. The congregation didn't need to know the details. They just noticed the shift, the way you notice when someone who used to stand at the front of the room starts sitting in the back. Megan's last text. She still comes every Sunday, but nobody asks her opinion anymore. Frank called on a Wednesday. I checked the caller ID twice. It was his cell, not the house phone, not Rosa on speaker, not a joint call, just Frank. I should have said something at the church. I waited. I'd heard enough half-apologies to know that the sentence after the apology is the one that matters. Your mother, she means well. She just doesn't know how to not be in charge. That's not an excuse, Dad. That's a description. He was quiet for a while. I could hear the TV in the background, a baseball game, volume low. Rosa wasn't in the room. I was sure of it because Frank Medina does not make phone calls like this when Rosa can hear. Can I see Lily? He asked. If you come alone, and if you don't report back to Mom about my house, my choices, or my parenting. I can try. Don't try. Decide. He came on Saturday. Alone. He parked in the driveway and sat in his truck for 2 full minutes before walking to the door. Nathan let him in. Frank held Lily for 20 minutes. He didn't rearrange anything in the nursery. He didn't comment on the formula brand or the room temperature or the way I'd folded the blankets. He just held his granddaughter and looked at her face like he was memorizing it. When he left, he stopped at the door. She looks happy. She is, he nodded, put on his hat, walked to his truck. He didn't mention Rosa. He didn't ask me to call her. He just left. It wasn't much. A 20-minute visit and 4 words. But it was the first time my father had chosen to show up for me without Rosa writing the script. And I'll take that. For now. It took Rosa 5 weeks to test the line. A Tuesday afternoon. I was feeding Lily in the kitchen when the doorbell rang. I checked the camera on my phone. Rosa. Standing on the porch, holding a gift bag with tissue paper blooming out the top. No phone call, no text, no 24-hour notice. I walked to the intercom by the front door and pressed the button. Mom, you know the rules. Call first. Morgan, for God's sake, I'm your mother. I don't need an appointment to see my own grandchild. You do now. Static. Then Rosa's voice, tighter. I drove 45 minutes. I have a gift for Lily. You can leave it on the porch, and next time call first. I released the button, stepped back. My hand was steady. My heart was hammering, but my hand was steady. Through the side window, I watched Rosa stand on the porch for close to 10 minutes. She looked at the door. She looked at the intercom. She looked up and down the street, maybe to see if neighbors were watching. Then she set the gift bag on the welcome mat and walked back to her car. She sat in the driveway for another 5 minutes before pulling out. After she left, I brought the bag inside. A dress for Lily, lavender, with a satin ribbon. The tag was still attached. Tucked inside was a card. For my little angel, from Grandma who loves you more than anything. I held the dress against Lily's chest. It was the right size. Rosa always gets the size right. I put it in Lily's closet. I didn't call Rosa to say thank you, and I didn't feel guilty about it. Nathan came home that evening. That was hard, he said. The hard part was letting her do it for 31 years. This part is just new. Thanksgiving. 4 months after the christening. Nathan's parents hosted. I brought Lily in a pumpkin print onesie. She was 6 months old, sitting up on her own, grabbing at everything. Nathan's mother held her for an hour straight and didn't put her down once. My Aunt Linda was there. She and Nathan's mother had been friends for years, which is how Nathan and I met in the first place. She was across the room when we arrived, holding a glass of wine and avoiding my eyes. It took her until dessert to approach. Your mother misses you terribly, Morgan. I set down my fork. Then she knows what to do. What do you mean? Apologize. Not to me, to Diane, in front of the same people she humiliated me in front of. Linda blinked. That's a lot to ask. Standing up in a church and calling your daughter unstable in front of 75 people was a lot to do. Linda opened her mouth, closed it, looked at her wine. Then she pulled out her phone and typed something, quickly, under the table, like she didn't want me to see. I didn't care. Let her text Rosa. Let Rosa know exactly what it takes. A public apology. Not to me, but to Diane. The woman she called and told she had no right to be in Lily's life. The woman who earned every bit of that godmother title with 2-hour drives and midnight bottles and showing up when Rosa chose to judge. After Linda walked away, I sat back and looked around the table. Nathan was cutting turkey for his nephew. Lily was chewing on a wooden spoon. Nathan's father was telling a story about a fishing trip and laughing at his own punchline. For the first time in a year, my shoulders weren't near my ears. December. A package arrived at our door. Small box, properly shipped, return address in Carmen's handwriting, not Rosa's. Inside, a soft plush rabbit, hand-picked, not expensive, but thoughtful. The kind of gift that says someone walked through a store and thought about a baby they've barely met. A card tucked inside. To Lily, from Aunt Carmen. I'd like to do better. 6 words. No mention of Rosa. No mom wants me to say. Just Carmen. She called 2 days later. Her voice was careful, measured, like someone choosing each word before speaking it. Can I come visit Lily next month? Just me? Just you? Just me, I promise. I let the pause hang. Not to punish her, to feel out whether I believed her. Okay. 1 word. Enough. I don't know if Carmen will follow through. She might come in January and hold Lily and mean every word. She might go home and tell Rosa everything. The layout of the nursery, what brand of diapers I use, whether there were dishes in the sink. She might be Rosa's scout. She might be her own person for the first time. I don't know. And I've decided that's all right. Carmen is my sister. She grew up in the same house I did, under the same rules, with the same mother pulling strings. The difference is that Rosa pulled Carmen closer and pushed me out. It's hard to see the machine when you're the favorite part. I'm not closing the door on her, but I'm not leaving it wide open for anyone Rosa can send through it. The door has a lock now, and I decide who gets the key. If Carmen earns it, she'll know. If she doesn't, she'll know that too. Christmas. For the first time in 31 years, I wasn't at Rosa's house. She hosted anyway. The same table, the same china, the same menu she'd been cooking since I was in elementary school. Ham, sweet potatoes, her cornbread that everyone in the family says is the best they've ever had. Carmen was there, Frank was there, 2 cousins. That was it. I know because Carmen mentioned it, briefly, without commentary, when she came to visit Lily the 2nd week of January. She kept her word. She came alone. Rosa posted a photo on Facebook that Christmas evening. The table, the plates, the tree. Caption, Blessed family time. 4 people in the frame. The absence of 2 others, and a baby, was louder than anything in the picture. A friend of Rosa's commented underneath, "Where's Morgan and the little one?" Rosa didn't reply. The comment was deleted within an hour. I saw it because Megan sent me a screenshot. I looked at it for a few seconds, then put my phone down. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel guilt. I felt something closer to quiet. Our Christmas was different. Nathan's parents came. Diane drove down and stayed the weekend. 2 friends from the hospital brought their kids. Lily got more gifts than any 10-month-old needs and spent most of the afternoon playing with the wrapping paper instead of the toys. The house was loud, full, warm. Nathan burned the bottom of the pie and we ate it anyway. Diane fell asleep on the couch with Lily on her chest. I took a photo of that. Lily's hand gripping Diane's collar, both of them breathing slowly. Rosa got the Christmas she built. So did I. The difference is, I'd build mine the same way again. 6 months since the christening. Lily is 10 months old. She pulls herself up on the coffee table and stands there grinning like she's conquered a mountain. She says something that sounds like "da" when Nathan walks into the room, and he pretends it's his name every single time. I'm back at work full-time, pediatric unit, 12-hour shifts. I come home tired in a way that feels earned, and Lily reaches for me the second I walk through the door. I hold her, and the whole day falls off my shoulders. Postpartum depression is behind me, not forgotten, not erased, but behind me. I don't hide it. If a new mother on my unit looks like she's struggling, I sit with her and say, I've been there. It's real. It gets better. You're not failing. And if someone tells you that asking for help means you're not ready to be a mother, they're wrong. Get help anyway. Diane is still godmother. She sends Lily a book every month, board books with animals and textures. She FaceTimes every Sunday morning. Lily recognizes her face on the screen now and slaps the phone with both hands. Rosa still hasn't apologized. Not to me, not to Diane, not to the congregation. She still goes to church on Sundays, but the woman who used to walk in like she owned the building now sits quietly in the third row and leaves before the coffee hour. I don't wait for her apology. I used to think I needed it. Needed Rosa to say I was a good mother. Needed her to see me clearly. I don't anymore. I see me clearly. Nathan sees me. Diane sees me. Lily sees me every single day. That's enough. That was always enough. I just didn't know it yet. If someone in your family takes your worst moment and turns it into a weapon, that tells you everything about them, and nothing about you. I had postpartum depression. That's a medical condition. It's not a character flaw. It's not evidence. And it is absolutely not something anyone gets to announce in a church full of people to steal a decision that was never theirs to make. Rosa didn't stand up that day because she was worried about Lily. She stood up because I'd stopped letting her decide. I chose my own godmother. I chose my own support system. I chose to get better on my own terms. Every one of those choices took something from Rosa. Not money, not status, but control. And control was the only language she ever spoke. I want you to hear this part clearly. Boundaries aren't walls. They're doors with locks. You get to decide who has a key. You don't owe anyone unlimited access to your life just because you share blood. You don't owe your mother a seat at the table if she uses that seat to tear you apart. You don't owe anyone an explanation for protecting your child. Not your mother, not your father, not the church, not 75 people in wooden pews. Rosa is still my mother. I still love her. That hasn't changed and probably never will. But love doesn't mean access, and it never ever means control. If you're sitting there right now, listening to this on your commute, or in your kitchen, or at 2 a.m. with your own baby in your arms, and you're wondering if you're allowed to say enough to your own family, you are. You always were. You don't need their permission. You don't need a letter. You just need one sentence that tells the truth. And then you walk. This morning I sat on the porch before sunrise. Lily was in my lap, wrapped in a blanket, half asleep, her fingers curled around my thumb. The air smelled like wet grass and coffee. Nathan came out with 2 mugs, handed me one, sat in the chair next to mine. We didn't talk. We just watched the sky turn from gray to gold. My phone buzzed. Diane, on FaceTime. I answered and held the screen in front of Lily. The second Lily saw Diane's face, she grinned, mouth wide, 2 teeth showing, and smacked the phone with an open palm. Good morning, beautiful girl, Diane said. Auntie Di's coming to see you next weekend. Lily babbled something that might have been a word, might have been nonsense. Didn't matter. It made Diane laugh. I hung up and leaned back. Nathan sipped his coffee. Somewhere in the distance, I heard church bells. Not Rosa's church. The other one, Grace Community, where Lily was christened. Where 20 people stood in a small white room and loved us without conditions. I looked down at Lily. She was watching a bird hop across the porch railing, completely fascinated, completely unbothered by anything that had happened before she was old enough to remember it. One day I'll tell her this story, not to make her angry at her grandmother, not to keep score, but so she knows. You never have to accept someone else's version of who you are. Not your boss's, not a stranger's, not even your mother's. You get to decide that for yourself. I picked up my daughter in a church full of people, and I whispered one thing. But I'd been finding my voice for 31 years. They watched me walk out of that church. They didn't see me walk into a better life. That's my story. And if it made you feel something, if it reminded you that you're allowed to protect yourself and your children, even from the people who are supposed to love you most, then do me one thing. Drop a comment. Tell me, was there a moment you realized someone's love was really about control? Or tell me this, what would you have whispered to that pastor? I read every single comment. And if you want more stories about real people drawing real lines, check the description. There's a playlist waiting for you. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.